As much as Dana White would love for all of his champions to make him millions of dollars and be super easy to work with, that's just not the reality of the UFC. So today, we thought it'd be fun to take a look at 10 title holders the UFC president absolutely could not stand and didn't want as champions. We're not saying they never got along, but these 10 fighters found many ways to piss off the boss. These are the top 10 fighters Dana White never wanted as champion. But before we start, don't forget to punch the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Also, like and share the video with your friends, and please watch until number 1 because it will be a big surprise to most of you. Number 10. Tyron Woodley. White and Woodley have a long history. They've tried to get along together, but it was really hard. The UFC president has been regularly critical of the former welterweight champion throughout his career, and Tyron being more than happy to fire back. Before he even held the title, White wasn't a fan of Woodley's safe style. After he shockingly KO'd Robbie Lawler to capture the belt at UFC 201, things didn't improve. Frustrated with how he was being marketed in the lead up to UFC 205, Woodley told the ESPN that he was the worst treated champion in the UFC history, and in part attributed this to his race, which made Dana call him a drama queen and drove fans away. The beef between these two didn't get any better after this rematch with Stephen Thompson, and another boring defense against Damian Maia. Woodley fired back at White, saying that if he didn't get treated better, he'd start spilling UFC dirt. A long layoff due to injury would end with Tyron mopping the floor with Darren Till, a fighter the UFC was priming to be a big star. Much was made of White's expression prior to giving the champion his belt, and he was also absent from the post-fight press conference. Lather was the failed Nate Diaz fight, and White accused Woodley of holding up the division with minor injuries, several times denying a fight with Colby Covington. There's almost too much to mention. They were seemingly never on the same page, and now that Woodley has dropped the strap to Usman, it'll be interesting to see what it's going to take for him to earn a shot given Dana and Tyron's history. Number 5 is Colby Covington. At first, it would have seemed that Colby Covington was exactly the type of champion Dana White would want. He was crazy and caused all kinds of chaos on the microphone, but a clash with the boss would nearly clip the wings before he ever flew. The trouble started after he captured the championship against Rafael dos Anjos. Dana White wanted him to fight Tyron Woodley 3 months later at UFC 228, but Covington had planned a surgery to correct a sinus issue and rejected the offer. After the fight failed to materialize several more times, White wanted Colby to fight Kamaru Usman, but Covington wasn't in the contender business anymore and rejected the fight, so Dana gave Usman the title shot against Woodley instead at UFC 235 and stripped Colby, who went on a media tour bashing White and the UFC. Next, Colby invaded 235 Fight Week, harassing Kamaru Usman with a bullhorn, and also was filmed confronting Dana at a blackjack table before waiting outside the casino next to White's car. The UFC president wasn't too impressed. 400 plus days after winning the interim title, Covington would try to get back in the UFC's good graces by taking a short notice fight with Robbie Lawler, while champion Usman was out with an injury. After dominating the fight there was no doubt he was next in line, and a title fight was scheduled for December, which he would go on to lose. And after all that, you'd have to wonder how Dana felt about Covington. So it's safe to say that White doesn't want Colby Covington as a champion. Number 8 is Tim Sylvia. Widely considered to reign over one of the weakest heavyweight divisions in the history of the promotion, Tim Sylvia wasn't exactly breaking pay-per-view records by the time he matched up with a recently unretired 43-year-old Randy Courtois at UFC 68. To give you some perspective on White's position, Sylvia didn't even headline in his previous title defense, despite being a champion in the heaviest weight class. In a classic moment, the underdog Courtois absolutely dominated Sylvia all fight. Then things got worse though. By next year, Tim wanted a shot at Brock Lesnar, but Dana said no, and Sylvia immediately asked out of his contract and was granted this release, something that almost never happens in the UFC, further demonstrating how little they valued their former champion. After being defeated by Fedor in 36 seconds, White told Yahoo Sports, "We all have to thank him for getting rid of Tim Sylvia. He's been stinking up the joint the last couple of years, and Fedor did everyone a favor by beating him so easily and getting rid of him. In 2012, Sean Shelby had put into motion an attempt to resize him in the newly Strikeforce, but White denied the return, saying nobody cares about Tim Sylvia. Number 7 is Germaine de Randamie. Dana White was pretty sore after UFC 208. The whole show was a bit of a dud, and not only did the main event not deliver, it ended in controversy after Germaine de Randamie hit Holly Holm twice after the horn and was deducted no points. The foul should have warranted a draw in his inaugural featherweight title fight, which according to Dana would have been the only possible way this night could have been ended. White rarely matchmakes post-fight, or at least doesn't like to, but on this night there was no doubt who was next. Cris Cyborg, the woman they built the division for in the first place. GDR had a rough start to her title run, but a big fight with one of the best of all time could certainly put her back in everyone's good graces. A week after Randamie won the title, Cyborg was cleared of any wrongdoing by a potential use of doping violation. And with that final hurdle out the way, the fight was tentatively scheduled for UFC 214 in June. But that May, the Iron Lady released a statement through her management that she refused to fight Cyborg due to her past with PEDs. The backlash from fans and media was constant, and a few weeks later Dana White had had enough. Randamie was stripped of her title, ending her 128-day reign. In an official statement, the UFC said the champions are expected to accept fights against the top contenders in their respective weight classes in order to maintain the integrity of the sport. Number 6 is Nico Montano. It's pretty incredible for a fighter to go from their UFC debut to Dana White being completely done with them in less than a year's time. But here's Nico Montano. After winning TUF 26 to become the inaugural flyweight champion, Montano simply had nothing but trouble. Her first title defense was meant to be against super popular axe murderer Valentina Shevchenko, who had recently moved to flyweight and brutalized Priscilla Cachoeira, but a surgery would leave the champion sidelined. Ariel Helwani would report that the UFC was getting tired of waiting on Nico and were looking to have her fight in July, but Montano was not going to be ready until October. 10 months after her debut and being crowned champion, White made his announcement. She didn't make weight. That's pretty much it. The title is vacated, so it's a vacant title right now. Montano would take to social media to point out how many champions have gone longer without being stripped. But White saw Starr and Shevchenko, and they weren't going to wait any longer. Valentina won the vacant title that December, a year after Nico's debut. Number 5 is Amanda Nunes. When Dana White gave a tour of his offices at the new UFC HQ, a huge image of Amanda Nunes featured prominently on one of the walls. Now, they've become really good friends, but things were not always that way. Amanda Nunes played the ultimate spoiler. Ronda Rousey was a promotional cash cow, and a rematch to regain her title with Holly Holm would break records. That was until Holm decided she wanted to fight Miesha Tate while waiting for Rousey. A decision White was not happy about, because the worst possible outcome came true when Tate won the fight by submission, so they lost the huge rematch. But at least Tate was Ronda's most bitter rival. Her return would still be huge. Tate was given a fight to defend her title at UFC 200 against Amanda Nunes, and in that day, Nunes beat Miesha. Now, all the UFC had was Ronda's coming back, and they really pushed that. Amanda was barely featured in any of the promotion leading up to the fight. There was no doubt who Dana and company wanted to win this one, but instead, Nunes beat Rousey worse than Holly did, forcing the Golden Goose to retire. Sometimes these things happen in MMA. If you're enjoying this video, please subscribe to our channel. It's 100% free and you help us a lot. Alright, let's continue. Number 4 is Fabricio Werdum. When Werdum defeated Fedor Emelianenko at Strikeforce 210, he broke one of the all-time greatest winning streaks in MMA history. Dana White had long-running issues with Fedor. In their most recent history, a fight with Brock Lesnar had fallen apart, and when asked about Fabricio's win, White disrespected him. Fabricio eventually came back to the UFC after Strikeforce was absorbed by Zuffa, and found himself on a 5-fight win streak with an interim heavyweight title. Unluckily for him, his next opponent would be the great Cain Velasquez, the two-time UFC champion who was on a 4-fight run of his own, with 2 epic beatdowns of Junior Dos Santos. And after a long layoff due to injury, the promotion was looking to make a huge push in the Mexican market, utilizing the champion's heritage in their second ever show in Mexico City. Unfortunately for Dana White, Fabricio submitted Velasquez in the 3rd round and took the title from him. The UFC has not held a pay-per-view in Mexico since. Number 3 is Demetrious Johnson. A few years into the UFC flyweight division's existence, there were 2 things that were apparent. Demetrious Johnson was the best 120 fighter in the world, and nobody cared about flyweight fights. Despite being literally the most successful UFC champion of all time, Johnson and the division were simply not drawing in the numbers the promotion was looking for. And for years, according to White, there was consideration for dropping the division entirely. Frankly, there's still that consideration. But the glue that everyone felt was keeping the division together at the time was Demetrious Johnson. He was too good to get rid of, right? In the lead up to his record-setting 11th title defense, Johnson got caught by publicly with the UFC brass about a potential fight with TJ Dillashaw. Demetrious wrote an open letter laying out all the issues with the TJ fight and his treatment by the promotion over the years. White responded by pointing out Johnson's poor pay-per-view numbers and questioned his position as the pound-for-pound number 1 in the world. Ultimately, DJ would fight and defeat Ray Bork, afterwards saying he was open to a super fight for a few million. Dana wasn't a fan of the idea, seemingly untouchable while still winning. Johnson's loss to Henry Cejudo in UFC 227 was the final nail in the coffin. Rather than cut one of the best fighters in history still in his prime, Dana opted to trade him to 1 championship for Ben Askren. Number 2 is Cris Cyborg. Holy moly, where do we start with this one? How about 2012 when Cyborg popped for steroids and was stripped of the Strikeforce title? A few months later, Ronda Rousey would make her bantamweight debut in the promotion. Many fans believing she did so to avoid a fight with Cris. From here, their paths diverged. Cyborg was sent to Invicta, and Rousey became the biggest star in the UFC. But the calls for a Cyborg-Rousey fight never went away. The response was always the same by Dana and Ronda though. Make 135 and we'll do it. Along the way, Rousey gave shots at Cyborg by calling Cris and it in a Yahoo interview. For years, it was the same line. White would make the fight today if Cyborg could make 135. Many fans felt like the UFC was simply protecting Ronda, but things started coming together in 2015 when Cris signed with the UFC. Immediately they ran into some trouble. Cyborg was basically dying making weight. For Cyborg initially lightened things up between White and his new 145-pound champion. But they would soar again once Amanda Nunes knocked the world and KO'd Cyborg in the last minute than UFC 232. One fight later, a victory over Felicia Spencer, Crisis' contract was done. But in the post-fight, Cyborg was calling for a new contract to rematch with Nunes, a fight Dana said Cris didn't actually want. This is when things went really off the rails. Cyborg posted a video of White on her YouTube channel, where it appeared as if he was saying he was lying about her, and that was really the last straw. After years of contention, Dana released a video explaining his side of the long, complex history, and it hilariously citing GDR's fears about Cyborg PDUs, and then ended their relationship with this simple phrase: "We're out of the Cyborg business." Cris went on to Bellator and is their current featherweight champion, and it's probably safe to say that this one's over for good. And finally, number 1 on this list is Georges St-Pierre. You either die a hero or you live long enough to piss Dana off. GSP was certainly good business for the UFC during his reign as welterweight champion, and during those times, St-Pierre and Dana White got along just fine. But following his controversial victory over Johnny Hendricks at UFC 167, Georges announced he was planning on taking some time away, and just like that, there was trouble. White was fuming about the judge's decision post-fight. The UFC president wasn't agreeing with the champion's desire to take a break. A month later, George vacated his title and left this giant disaster behind him. For a few years, he would return in 2017, moving up to middleweight to take the title from Michael Bisping at UFC 217. One of the stipulations of getting that fight was that GSP would have to defend against Robert Whittaker if he won. George vacated again, and as a result of medical concerns, and White was not surprised. Talk started heating up in 2018 about a second return and a lightweight title fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov, but after St-Pierre's official retirement that next year, the UFC ultimately shot down the idea of the fight for fear that GSP would again vacate the title if he wins. This is all very recent, so literally right now, White doesn't want George as champion. And that's how we conclude our top 10. Out of all these clips, which one was your favourite? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll handpick and feature your comment in the next video, so don't forget to comment. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure you hit the like button to show your support. It was a pleasure to talk to you guys, so please like and share the video with your friends, and I'll see you next time.